captain's hand clamped down on her shoulder. It wasn't just a touch, it was an anchor, a dead weight of possession and authority, sinking her just as her own hand, fingers outstretched, brushed the cold steel of the door handle leading to the tarmac. For a dizzying second, she felt the phantom chill of the handle, a promise of the open sky, before the warmth of his palm through her uniform's thick cream fabric became the only reality. Cool, conditioned air, smelling of rich, buttery leather and the faint, metallic tang of distant jet fuel, filled the exclusive Sky Lounge. It was a scent she usually associated with the start of an adventure, the prelude to takeoff. Now, it was the sterile air of an operating theater. The low, guttural hum of a Gulf Stream, taxiing on the runway, vibrated through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a deep thrum that resonated not in her ears but in her bones, a sound that usually meant promise. Now, a cadence of dread. Brilliant morning sunlight streamed across the polished Carrara marble, a river of light glinting off the chrome legs of Eames chairs and the discreet diamond studs of the billionaires pretending not to watch the unfolding drama. The air tasted of overpriced, slightly bitter espresso and the cloying sweetness of entitlement. Dr. Lena Dubois, the crisp lines of her custom-made pilot's uniform, tailored around the gentle, proud swell of her 7-month pregnancy, did not flinch. She simply turned her head, her blonde hair pinned in a severe but elegant chignon, not moving a millimeter. Captain Richard Miller's grip tightened, his fingers digging into the muscle between her neck and shoulder. "Just where do you think you're going, Dubois?" His voice, a low rumble meant to convey unquestionable authority, seemed to suck the ambient sound from the hushed lounge. He stood a full head taller, a monolith in his dark Northwind airline suit, the 4 gold bars on his epaulets gleaming like a predator's eyes in the bright light. He was a man accustomed to speaking while the world fell silent to listen. He spoke, and weather patterns yielded. He spoke, and flight paths were cleared. He spoke, and he spoke, and he spoke. "I'm flying, Captain." Lena kept her voice even, a placid lake against his impending storm. Her tone was a carefully calibrated instrument of professionalism. She could feel the stares like physical things, the laser-focused curiosity of other pilots, the nervous glances of flight crews, the detached amusement of the high-net-worth passengers waiting to board their private jets. He laughed, a sharp, ugly bark of a sound that was utterly out of place in the room's muted elegance. "No, you're not. Not on my authority, not in my sky." He leaned forward, his shadow falling over her. "I've reviewed your file, Dr. Dubois, meticulously." The way he spat the title made it sound like an accusation. A PhD in aeronautical engineering doesn't give you a pass on basic flight regulations. Section 14, subsection C, paragraph 2, any pilot with a known medical condition that could impede performance is subject to immediate grounding. And you, my dear, are a walking, talking, gestating medical condition. A moment passed. Behind him, a flash of crimson. Brittany Sterling, head of corporate communications, leaned against a marble pillar, a smug, knowing smirk playing on her perfectly painted lips. Her red dress was a wound in the room's symphony of muted grays and blues. A cascade of gold bangles clattered on her wrist as she took a slow, deliberate sip of champagne, her eyes, cold and amused, fixed on Lena over the rim of the crystal flute. Lena's hand went to her belly, a subconscious, instinctual shield for Amara. The baby shifted, a slow, powerful roll against her palm, a secret conversation in a language only she understood. "My pregnancy isn't a medical condition, Richard. It's a temporary physiological state." My FAA medical is current and holds a first-class designation without waivers. My obstetrician, Dr. Anand, has cleared me for flight duties through 32 weeks, providing documentation to the airline's medical board, which has also signed off. You have seen the paperwork. You know this. A moment passed. I know what I see. He finally released her shoulder, the sudden absence of pressure making her feel untethered. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was somehow louder and more invasive than a shout. The scent of his coffee and self-importance breath washed over her. I see a liability. I see a woman who thinks the rules don't apply to her because she has a fancy degree in a delicate situation. What happens when you get a Braxton Hicks contraction at 30,000 feet and mistake it for the real thing? Who's flying the jet then? The co-pilot you're distracting with your drama? What happens when you're dealing with third trimester fatigue during a critical approach in bad weather? This isn't a classroom, Lena. It's not a simulator. This is the real world with real lives at stake, lives that I am responsible for. There was a brief silence. He gestured expansively, his arm sweeping across the lounge, grabbing the attention of everyone present as if he were a stage magician revealing his trick. He was a preacher on a pulpit of his own making, and his gospel was fear. Northwind Airlines cannot and will not absorb that risk. I will not absorb that risk. I am the senior captain on this fleet, and my word is final. My judgment is what our passengers buy when they buy a ticket. You are a danger to yourself, to your crew, and to my passengers. It is my duty to protect them from your recklessness, from your ambition. A moment passed. Every word was a stone, every sentence a carefully aimed blow. He was building a cage of protocol and twisted procedure around her, and he was doing it in public because the humiliation was the point. This was a performance for the entire company. From across the room, near the brushed steel arch of the security checkpoint, Officer David Kim stood motionless. His uniform was immaculate, his posture rigid. He watched the exchange, not with the disinterest of a guard, but with the focus of a documentarian. His phone was held low, angled down as if he were checking a message, but the dark screen of the device was angled just so, the small red light of the camera, a tiny blinking secret. He didn't move, he didn't speak, he just recorded. My flight record is perfect, Lena stated. It was a simple, irrefutable fact. She had more hours in this specific airframe than Miller did. A moment passed. Brittany's bracelets clinked again, a sound like an alarm bell as she pushed off the pillar and sauntered over. Her red heels clicked like a countdown clock on the marble floor. Perfect, or lucky. She purred, stopping beside Richard and placing a proprietary hand on his arm, her red nails a stark contrast to his dark suit. She looked Lena up and down, her gaze lingering on the swell of her stomach. Things change, Lena. Priorities change. We have to consider the optics, the brand image. Perhaps your focus should be on nesting, preparing the nursery, not flying multi-million-dollar assets through turbulent skies. A brief silence. My focus is on my job, Lena said, her chin rising, her decision made. She would not be cowed. The one I am qualified, certified, and cleared to do. The one I was scheduled for this morning. Richard's face hardened, the thin mask of professional concern slipping completely to reveal the raw, ugly arrogance beneath. He looked from Lena's defiant face down to her rounded stomach with theatrical disdain, a slow, insulting appraisal. Your job right now is to be a mother. Let the men handle the flying. You're grounded, effective immediately." He said it for the room to hear, a public proclamation, a decree from on high. "You will not set foot on that tarmac. You will not enter the cockpit of the designated aircraft. You will go home." There was a moment of reflection. He was dismembering her career in front of her peers. He was using her child, her beautiful unborn Amara, as the weapon. "You don't have this authority," she said it quietly, but with the force of a turbine engine spooling up. Grounding a pilot requires a formal review by the chief pilot's office in conjunction with flight operations and medical. It's not the unilateral decision of a line captain, no matter how senior. A moment passed. "Don't I?" He swelled with indignation, his chest puffing out, his face flushing a dangerous shade of red. "I am Captain Richard Miller. I command this fleet. My judgment is what keeps people safe. My decisions are what this airline is built on. I have made a command decision based on a clear and present safety risk. I decide who is fit to fly and who is a risk. And I have decided." There was a brief silence. He leaned in one last time, so close she could see the tiny broken capillaries in his eyes. "Go home, little mother." He turned, a grand, dismissive pivot of his entire body. Brittany gave Lena a final, pitying glance, a triumphant, venomous gleam in her eye before hooking her arm through Richard's. They walked toward the tarmac door, a king and his consort leaving a peasant in their wake. The heavy door clicked shut behind them, the sound echoing in the cavernous space. The silence they left was a gaping wound. It widened, sucking the air from the lounge, leaving only the stale scent of judgment and disinfectant. Lena stood, her uniform a stark cream against the opulent room, feeling the weight of unseen eyes. Each glance was a fresh bruise she would not crack. Not here, not for them. Her hand, still shielding her belly, found the subtle thrum of Amara within. A gentle, insistent flutter, a reminder of life, of purpose, that had nothing to do with the polished marble or the hollow echo of a captain's pronouncements. The heat in her cheeks was a physical fire. She turned, slowly, deliberately, not looking at anyone, her gaze fixed on the double doors that led to the private terminal's quieter recesses. Her legs felt disconnected, phantom limbs carrying her through the thick, judgmental air. Each step was a battle. Her spine was rigid. The muted chatter resumed behind her, a wave breaking and receding, leaving her stranded. The scent of bitter espresso now felt acrid in her nostrils. She walked past a discreet alcove where a polished chrome sign indicated the executive restrooms. The cool air conditioning brushed her skin like a phantom touch. She needed to be alone. The corridor was blessedly empty, carpeted in thick, charcoal wool that swallowed the sound of her carefully measured steps. Her ears still rang, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the distant rumble of jets. She pushed open the heavy, unmarked door. The women's restroom was a study in stark luxury. Black granite countertops stretched a dozen feet, reflecting the soft glow of recessed lighting. Gold-plated faucets gleamed. The air here was cool, dry, carrying a faint, clean scent of expensive soap and the metallic tang of running water. No one else was there. A mercy. She chose the farthest stall, its frosted glass door sliding shut with a soft, almost soundless sigh. The click of the lock was a small, fragile victory. She leaned against the cool porcelain of the stall wall, her vision blurring at the edges. Her chest felt tight, an iron band compressing her lungs. She closed her eyes. The humiliation returned, a fresh wave washing over her, hot and corrosive. Richard's words, Brittany's smirk, the cold, pitying stares. He had used Amara against her. He had turned her greatest joy into a weapon, a public vulnerability. The sound of her own ragged breathing filled the small space, amplified, a strange, choked rasp. She felt the tremors start in her knees, then spread to her hands. They shook, uncontrollably, delicate tremors that spoke of a deep, inner quake. She slid down the wall, the fine cream fabric of her uniform catching on the rough texture of the grout lines. The cold tile floor seeped through her trousers, a welcome, grounding chill against her burning skin. She curled inward, hugging her knees to her chest, her hands moving instinctively to her belly. Amara, her anchor, her purpose. A slow, comforting roll against her palm, a whisper of reassurance. The memory surfaced. You are not alone. The world had shrunk to this stall, this cold floor, this precious life within her. Everything else, the airline, the career, the judgment, receded. It was just her and her baby. This was all that mattered. A fresh wave of nausea coiled in her stomach, a physical manifestation of the insult. She gripped her belly tighter, pressing down, a futile effort to calm the rising bile. The world outside the stall door felt distant, a fading echo. She listened to the hum of the ventilation system. It was a monotonous drone, a blank slate for her thoughts. The baby shifted again, a more vigorous kick this time, a tiny foot pressing against her ribcage. Amara already fighting, already strong. The memory surfaced. No, my sweet girl, this is not how we are defined. The cold floor was a harsh reality against her cheek. She focused on its texture, the slightly rough surface of the tile, the smooth, cool grout. The ringing in her ears pulsed, a relentless, insistent beat. She squeezed her eyes tighter, trying to stem the hot tears that threatened to fall. Not here, not again. She would not give them that satisfaction. She would not let their cruelty dim this light, this profound, wondrous light growing within her. Her fingers traced the curve of her belly, feeling the tautness of her skin, the undeniable evidence of life. The memory surfaced. My baby is strong. A moment passed. A faint sound broke through her private storm, a soft scuffing, then silence. A hesitation. She froze, listening. Had someone come in? The shame returned, fresh and potent. She pulled her knees tighter, trying to become smaller, invisible. She heard a soft thud, then the gentle whisper of paper. Ido. Still, no words, no footsteps receding, a silent presence. Slowly, cautiously, she uncurled, pushing herself up, using the cold wall for support. Her muscles protested, stiff from the strain. She looked down. Just outside her stall, nestled against the polished black granite base, sat a small, pristine bottle of water. Next to it, a neatly folded stack of white paper tissues. A plain business card rested on top. Her hand, still trembling, reached out. The water bottle was cool, condensation beating on its surface. The tissues were soft. She picked up the card. It was thick, substantial stock. No Northwind Airlines logo, just a name, precisely centered, David Kim. Below it, a mobile number, no title. No company, nothing else. Officer Kim, the security officer from the terminal, the silent witness. He had seen. He had understood. He had offered a small, quiet kindness. He hadn't spoken. He hadn't offered platitudes. He had simply acted. The tears, held back so ferociously, pricked at her eyes again. This time, they were different. Not tears of shame, but a hot, stinging ache of gratitude. She drank the cool water, a slow, deliberate sip. The moisture smoothed her parched throat. She wiped her eyes with a tissue, pressing it gently to her lids. No more crying. Not in public. Never again. She looked at her reflection in the full-length mirror outside the stall. Her uniform was a little rumpled. Her face was pale, but her chin was rising. She straightened her shoulders. She looked at her belly, the soft curve under the cream fabric. She touched it, a firmer touch this time. Amara stirred within. A quiet resolve settled in her heart. This was not the end. This was a beginning. A cold, hard clarity. She was not broken. She was simply beginning a new kind of fight. But while Lena was steeling herself for the coming battle, the architects of her humiliation were already celebrating their perceived victory. Far from the sterile quiet of the executive washroom, another door was closing, sealing in a different kind of silence. The heavy oak door clicked shut, the sound swallowed by the sudden cavernous silence. It was a seal, locking out the public world of the terminal and enclosing them in a private universe of mahogany and malice. The air, chilled to a precise 68 degrees, smelled of aged leather, the faint, peaty aroma of single malt scotch, and the metallic hum of a powerful, silent server rack hidden behind a paneled wall. Captain Richard Miller threw his head back and roared. It was not the sharp, ugly bark from the lounge. This was a laugh of pure, unadulterated victory, a deep, rolling thunder that seemed to shake the very glass of the framed aviation maps on the walls. He spun, grabbing Brittany Sterling by the waist, lifting her off the floor. Her red silk dress billowed around him, a splash of blood against the dark wood and his own black suit. The gold bangles on her wrist chimed, a chaotic little victory anthem. "Did you see her face?" He set her down, his hands still gripping her arms, that perfect porcelain mask. "Did you see the cracks forming?" A moment passed. Brittany ran a scarlet-nailed finger down his lapel, tracing the gold captain's bars. "I saw a woman realizing her time was up, and I saw a man finally taking what is rightfully his." She tilted her head, the heavy gold hoops in her ears catching the light. "Show me, Ricky. Show me how completely you've won." A brief silence. He grinned, a predator's smile. He released her and turned to his desk, a vast expanse of polished mahogany that reflected the cool, recessed lighting like a dark lake. He ran his hand over its smooth, cold surface before picking up a slim, black leather portfolio. He opened it with the reverence of a priest opening a sacred text. "The plan, my love, was never just to ground her. That was simply the opening act, the public performance required to establish the narrative." He spoke with the slow, deliberate cadence of a lecturer, savoring each word, each precisely engineered detail of his coup. "The narrative is this. Dr. Lena Dubois is an unstable, ambitious woman who put her career ahead of the safety of her own unborn child, her crew, and her passengers. A woman whose judgment cannot be trusted." There was a moment of reflection. He tapped a glossy sheet of paper. "Divorce papers, filed electronically from my phone 30 minutes ago. The petition cites emotional distress and irreconcilable differences, supported by a signed affidavit from a concerned colleagues about her erratic behavior." Brittany leaned over his shoulder, her perfume, a heavy cloud of jasmine and triumph, enveloping him. "Your personal assistant?" "My personal assistant," he confirmed, not looking at her. He slid the paper aside, revealing another. asset transfer. The moment the divorce was filed, it triggered a clause in our prenup, the one her father's high-priced lawyers insisted on. It allows for the immediate protection of liquid assets in the event of a filing. Our friends at Sterling March executed the transfer of all funds from joint accounts into a blind trust. Her access was cut off exactly 19 minutes ago. A moment passed. He paused, letting the weight of his meticulous planning settle in the chilled air. He lived for this, the intricate mechanics of power. The world was a complex machine, and he was one of the few men who understood how to operate every lever. She's stranded. No access to funds. Her credit cards, all tied to the primary joint account, will be declined within the hour. She is a pilot with no plane, a wife with no husband, and a wealthy woman with no money. He closed his eyes for a second, a moment of sheer bliss. It is a beautiful thing. A brief silence. Brittany traced the 10th line of his jaw. And the baby? Richard's eyes snapped open, cold and clear. Our masterstroke. We file for preemptive custody the moment the child is born. We'll argue her documented professional recklessness, which I so kindly established for the record today, proves she is an unfit mother. We'll have testimony. We'll have her grounding report. We'll have the public humiliation. We will paint her as a career-obsessed hysteric who would sacrifice her own child for a few more hours in the cockpit. There was a moment of reflection. He looked at Brittany, his face alight with a fanatic's zeal. She won't even get visitation. The child, my son, will be raised by us, away from her influence, away from that family's suffocating legacy. A brief pause. Brittany's smile tightened. She pulled away, sauntering to the wet bar built into the wall. The clink of a crystal decanter being lifted was the only sound. She poured 2 fingers of the peaty scotch into a heavy tumbler. That all sounds wonderful, Richard. A perfect plan for your future. For your son. A moment passed. She turned, the tumbler cold in her hand. But you've been promising me a future for 2 years. I'm not just the audience for your little plays. I'm the co-star. Where's my equity? I'm the head of communications who helped you build this narrative. Where's the ring? I'm the woman who stood by you, not that ice queen. Her voice was dangerously quiet. Where is my commitment? There was a brief silence. Richard's triumphant expression faltered, replaced by irritation, a minor turbulence. He crossed the room to her, his posture exuding a placating dominance. He took the drink from her hand and set it down. Brittany, don't do this now. Not today. Today is for celebrating. I want to know that when you cut her out, you're putting me in, all the way, not just as your mistress, as your wife, as your partner. A moment passed. He sighed, a long, theatrical exhalation. He looked past her, through the tinted, soundproof window that overlooked the private tarmac where the jet he should be flying sat, gleaming and silent. He thought of Lena, of her quiet confidence, her infuriating competence, her belly. Lena is an obstacle, a problem to be solved. She's just the vessel, not the cargo. She took his hand from his side and placed it on her stomach, her flat-toned stomach hidden beneath the red silk. Richard stared at her hand, then at her face. Confusion warred with his arrogance. What are you talking about? I'm late. 3 small words. They hung in the air, more potent than his entire monologue. I was going to wait to tell you. I didn't want to complicate things. A tear, perfectly timed, welled in the corner of her eye. Richard, I'm pregnant! A moment passed. The silence in the room was absolute. the hum of the server, the whisper of the air conditioning, it all vanished. Richard's face, a canvas of triumph and irritation just moments before, went blank. He looked down at her stomach, where his hand rested. He looked back at her face, at the single tear now tracing a path through her perfect makeup. And he believed her. His ego demanded it. Of course he was this powerful, this virile, a new life to replace the old, a new family forged in his image, born of his triumph, a clean slate, a better air, the last piece of his perfect new world clicking into place. A slow smile spread across his face, erasing all doubt. It was a smile of incandescent vanity. "A baby!" he breathed. "My baby!" He grabbed her, his kiss no longer conspiratorial but proprietary. He owned this woman. He owned the life inside her. He owned everything. He pulled back, his eyes wild with renewed purpose. The timeline moves up. Everything moves up. He strode to his desk, grabbing his phone. He jabbed a number on the screen, his movements sharp, decisive. He put it on speaker, the dispassionate tone filling the room. "Thorne," a clipped voice answered. "It's Miller." Richard's voice was pure command. "We're accelerating. File everything, now. The divorce, the asset injunction, and I want you to file the preemptive custody motion against Dubois. Full package." "And Thorne?" Richard paused, a smirk playing on his lips. "Start drawing up the paperwork for a new prenup. The future Mr. Miller will be needing one." He ended the call without waiting for a reply. The point of no return. A button pushed, a machine set in motion. Unaware of the machinations unfolding in the heights of Richard Miller's office, Lena emerged from the quiet sanctuary of the restroom, her resolve hardening with each measured breath. The world outside, however, was already shifting beneath her feet. The automated doors of the executive restroom hissed open, releasing Lena into the hushed corridor. The thick carpet absorbed her steps, a silent protest to the turmoil within. Her reflection in the polished chrome of a fire extinguisher box showed a woman composed, if pale. Chin up. She walked past the discreet alcoves and hushed executive lounges towards the main terminal. The air grew thicker with the scent of recycled air and distant jet fuel. The bustle of travelers increased, a low, thrumming undercurrent of motion and murmured conversations. She reached the security checkpoint, a necessary annoyance. Her bag, a simple cream carry-on, glided through the scanner. Her phone, warm from her grip, felt heavy. She paused by an airline information screen, checking her next flight. Los Angeles to New York, connecting to Geneva. A familiar, comforting routine. She pulled out her platinum corporate card, sleek and cold in her fingers, ready to grab a coffee. The automated machine beeped, a sharp, flat refusal. DEC lined. A flicker of surprise. She swiped again. DEC lined. Her brow furrowed. She tried another, her personal card. The same insistent, mocking beep. DEC lined. Confusion turned to a cold prickle of unease. This was not right. Not possible. She stepped aside, a knot forming in her stomach. Amara gave a gentle roll, a curious shift. Lena's hand went to her belly, a protective, questioning gesture. She pulled out her phone, dialing the corporate bank line, her fingers flying across the screen. The automated voice, calm and detached, informed her of a security hold on all accounts. For more information, please contact your account manager during business hours. It was already past 5 o'clock. The line went dead. A moment passed. Her stomach churned. This was Richard. It had to be. No one else could move so fast, so maliciously. She needed to get home, get to her laptop, check her records, her car. She hailed a black car service offering her corporate card, declined. She tried her personal card again, the digital payment failing. The driver, a kind-faced man, gave her a sympathetic glance. "Cash?" he asked. Lena shook her head. Her wallet held a paltry amount, not enough for the ride to her secluded West Hollywood residence. She turned away, a strange, hollow sensation spreading through her chest. The heat of the terminal felt stifling. She walked, each step resonating with a growing sense of dread, toward the taxi stand. This time, she would pay cash. Every dollar spent felt like a tiny defeat. The familiar drive felt alien. The palm trees lining the boulevard seemed to mock her, swaying in the gentle breeze. The warm, dry air of Los Angeles, usually a comfort, now felt oppressive. She reached her street, a quiet, tree-lined avenue where manicured hedges guarded large, elegant homes. Her house, her sanctuary, or so she thought. The taxi pulled up to her driveway. Her Range Rover, usually parked in its designated spot, was gone. A sudden, sharp intake of breath. This was wrong. So wrong. She walked up the stone path, the pebbles crunching under her feet. Her hand, trembling, went to her key. The lock clicked, but the mechanism spun freely. The key did not catch. Changed. The locks were changed. A cold dread seeped into her bones, chilling her despite the balmy afternoon. She tried another key, then another. Nothing. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Dr. Dubois, this is Thorne, Richard Miller's attorney." The voice was crisp, devoid of warmth. "I regret to inform you that pursuant to the temporary restraining order filed this afternoon, you are prohibited from entering the premises at the Sycamore Drive residence. Your vehicle has been impounded, and access to all joint accounts and credit lines has been frozen pending divorce proceedings." Lena's mind reeled. Divorce proceedings? She hadn't even been served papers. She stood there, bewildered and exposed, while high above the city, the orchestrator of her sudden downfall savored his triumph. "What are you talking about?" Her voice was thin, reedy. "The papers will be served to you shortly. A process server is en route to your current location. I suggest you comply to avoid further legal complications." The line clicked dead. A moment passed. She stared at the phone, then at her own front door. A stranger's door now. Amara stirred within her, a flutter against her hand. Lena pressed her palm to her belly, seeking a measure of calm. Her chest tightened, making breathing shallow. She closed her eyes, willing the image of Richard's smug face away. Meanwhile, Richard sat in a glass-walled conference room high above the city, the afternoon sun glinting off the polished mahogany table. The room hummed with a hushed intensity, smelling faintly of rich leather and the metallic tang of new paper printouts. 3 attorneys, all in sleek dark suits, flanked him. Their faces were impassive, their eyes sharp. Brittany sat at the far end, in a tailored red dress, her heavy gold earrings catching the light as she shifted. A half-empty glass of iced tea sat before her, untouched. "The temporary restraining order is in place," Thorne confirmed, his voice precise. "She's locked out. Her vehicle is in our impound lot. All liquid assets are secured in the blind trust." He pushed a document across the table. "These are the divorce papers ready for service. Irreconcilable differences, emotional distress, and a strong emphasis on her alleged professional negligence." A brief silence. Richard's mouth curved into a slow, satisfied smile. He leaned back in his chair, a man utterly in command. "Excellent! And the preemptive custody motion? Another attorney, a stern woman with sharp eyes, spoke. We've drafted a preliminary motion. It highlights her documented erratic behavior, citing this morning's incident. We can argue an unfit environment for the child, given her recent actions and emotional instability. Brittany's hand resting on the table clenched slightly. Her jewelry jingled, a small, nervous sound in the quiet room. She looked at Richard, then away, her gaze drifting to the panoramic view of the city, a city that seemed to shrink under his gaze. Richard's eyes narrowed, a predator assessing its prey. I want to cripple her, professionally, financially, emotionally. He paused, letting the silence hang. I want her to understand the depth of her miscalculation. He looked at Brittany. You made sure those concerned colleague affidavits were airtight? A moment passed. Brittany met his gaze. They're ironclad, irrefutable. From pilots she thought were her friends. Her voice was steady, betraying nothing. Richard nodded. Perfect. He turned back to his attorneys. When will she be served? The process server is at her residence now, Thorne stated. She will receive them within the hour. A cold satisfaction settled in Richard's chest. He raised a hand. Call her. Now. I want to watch her face when she gets the news. Back at her locked front door, Lena was dialing a friend, a fellow pilot she had trusted. The phone rang, then went to voicemail. She tried another, then another. No one picked up. A sickening realization dawned on her. This wasn't just Richard, it was a coordinated attack. A brief silence. Her phone buzzed. Richard's number. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She answered, pulling her chin up. Richard? Her voice was steady, though her hands trembled. Lena, I trust you're enjoying the fresh air? His voice was a silken sneer, amplified by the speakerphone in the sterile conference room. What is this, Richard? What game are you playing? Game? He chuckled, a low, guttural sound. No game, my dear, just consequences. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. You made a scene this morning, publicly questioned my authority, disrespected me. There are repercussions for such actions. A moment passed. Lena's fingers tightened on her phone. Amara gave another kick, a sharp, insistent jab. My actions? You publicly humiliated me, threatened my career, threatened my child. And now you're experiencing a taste of what happens when you cross me. His voice hardened. You're locked out of your house, your car is gone, your money is gone, your credit is worthless. You are nothing, Lena, a grounded pilot, a disgraced wife, and soon an unfit mother. A brief silence. Lena gasped. The words were a physical blow. The air rushed from her lungs. She pressed her hand to her belly, a wave of nausea washing over her. You wouldn't? Oh, I would, and I will. His voice was laced with venom, a dark satisfaction. I'm taking everything from you, Lena, every last thing. And when that child is born, I'll ensure it never knows the rot of your influence. My son will be raised in a proper home with a stable mother. Not by a hysterical, career-obsessed woman who put herself above everything. There was a moment of reflection. He leaned closer to the phone, his voice dropping to a whisper, cutting through her like a surgeon's scalpel. You see, Lena, you are disposable, an inconvenience, and now you are eliminated. A sharp rap on her shoulder made Lena jump. She spun around. A man in a plain suit stood there holding a thick envelope. Dr. Lena Dubois, he stated, his voice flat. Lena could only nod, her throat suddenly tight, her world tilting. You've been served. The weight of the papers was crushing, each sheet a blow to her reeling mind. Richard's cruel words echoed in her ears, a venomous chorus. She was stripped bare, alone. All she had was her phone. The papers, crisp, heavy legal briefs detailing the end of her world, slipped from her numb fingers, scattering across the manicured lawn like a flurry of dead autumn leaves. Lena didn't watch them fall. A cramp, savage and hot, seized her low in her belly, a vicious clenching that stole her breath. She gasped, a sharp, involuntary sound in the quiet afternoon, her hand flying to the swell of her cream dress. This was not the gentle, familiar roll of Amara shifting within her. This was a claw, sharp and unforgiving, digging into her from the inside out. She stumbled, her balance lost, lurching against the cold, unforgiving stone of her own gatepost. The rough texture of the granite bit into her palm. The scent of jasmine from the neighbor's hedge, usually a sweet welcome, was now thick and cloying, a suffocating perfume mixed with the acrid, metallic bite of city exhaust. Pain, a new wave, more powerful than the last, crashed over her. It felt like being ripped in two. She fought for breath, her lungs refusing to expand. Her vision swam, the perfect green of the lawn blurring with the gray of the sidewalk into a nauseating swirl. Not here, not like this. Her phone, her only lifeline. Her fingers, suddenly slick with a cold sweat, fumbled with the smooth glass of the screen. All her contacts, all the powerful people who once took her calls without question, were ghosts now. All her vast resources systematically severed by Richard, all but one. A ghost account, a black card car service her father, ever the planner, had set up for her in college, an emergency measure for a life she thought she'd never lead. Her thumb, trembling, stabbed at the icon. A car was 5 minutes away. 5 minutes! The world could end and be reborn in 5 minutes. The black sedan, sleek and silent as a phantom, pulled up just as another contraction ripped through her, forcing a low groan from her clenched teeth. The driver, a silhouette behind the dark glass, leaped out. His eyes widened in alarm as he saw her doubled over, clutching the gatepost. He rushed to help her into the cool, dark leather of the back seat. The door closed with a heavy, satisfying thud, sealing her in a cocoon of quiet and escalating agony. Cedars, Sinai, the private maternity wing, please hurry. Her voice was a thread, frayed and thin. Right away, ma'am. Her vision tunneled. The city lights, just beginning to flicker on in the twilight, blurred into streaks of indifferent color. Red, yellow, white, a meaningless smear painting the window. She had to call him. The thought was galling, a bitter pill of humiliation she was forced to swallow. But this was not about her pride. This was about Amara. With a shaking hand, she found his number. She pressed call. The phone rang twice. I'm busy, Lena. Richard's voice was slick with champagne and the easy cadence of victory. In the background, she could hear it all. The faint, sophisticated chime of glasses, the murmur of a party, and the sharp, distinctive sound of Brittany's low laugh. Richard. The word was a shard of glass in her throat. Another contraction crested, a monstrous wave of pain. She held her breath, her knuckles turning white as she pressed them against her belly as if she could physically hold the baby in. The baby! A brief silence. Ah, yes, the baby! His voice dripped with a chilling, theatrical condescension. Let me guess, you're feeling overwhelmed by the reality of your situation. You need my support. You're willing to do anything to get me to reconsider. He laughed, a low, ugly sound devoid of any real humor. A magnificent performance, truly, but the show is over. I'm not coming to rescue you. He hung up. The dial tone was a piercing shriek of finality, an electronic scream in the silent car that echoed the one trapped in her own throat. While Lena writhed in the clutches of agonizing uncertainty, desperately racing against time and her own body, Richard basked in the glow of his callous victory. In his gleaming penthouse apartment, Richard placed the phone on the glass table with a definitive, self-satisfied click. Brittany, a vision in a blood-red cocktail dress that clung to her like a second skin, refilled his glass with champagne. Her heavy gold bracelets clattered, a sound of nervous, triumphant energy. "Was that her?" she asked, her voice a little too sharp. Richard ignored her. He walked to the floor, to ceiling window, a wall of blackness pricked with the diamond-sharp lights of the city he now commanded. For a fleeting moment, the bravado fell away. The mask of cruel indifference slipped. He saw not the glittering city, but a grainy black-and-white image from months ago, a tiny, pulsing flicker in the deep black of a monitor. The memory surfaced. "She has your hands," Lena had whispered, her voice filled with awe. He remembered the irrational, shocking surge of fierce, terrifying pride, a feeling so potent it had scared him. His reflection stared back at him now, a man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, a conqueror. "She's faking it," he said, the words more to the man in the glass than to Brittany. The lie was a shield, the cruelty, a fortress he had built around that flicker of terrifying pride. He turned from the window, the mask firmly back in place. "She wants to ruin our celebration. Let's not allow it." A moment passed. The hospital doors hissed open into a world of polished white floors and the sterile, cold scent of antiseptic and bleach. The air was chilled, still, and unnervingly quiet. A nurse at a reception desk took one look at Lena's face, her ashen color a stark contrast to the cream of her dress, now stained with sweat, and a code was called. A wheelchair appeared as if from nowhere. Voices became urgent but quiet, a flurry of hushed, practiced efficiency. "Dr. Dubois, I'm Dr. Anya Sharma." A woman with calm, intelligent eyes and a firm, reassuring presence met hers. "You're having severe contractions, and your blood pressure is dangerously high. This looks like acute preeclampsia." A brief silence. Lena's world narrowed to the doctor's face, an anchor in the swirling chaos of pain. The pain was a constant sea now, the waves indistinguishable from one another, a roaring in her ears. Her hand rested on her belly, a permanent, protective fixture. "The baby?" she rasped. "Her heart rate is decelerating with each contraction. She's in distress, Dr. Dubois." The doctor's voice was gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. "We don't have time to wait. We need to perform an emergency C-section, now." There was a moment of reflection. A decision? Chin up, shoulders back, even while lying down. She was a doctor. She was a mother. Lena met the doctor's gaze. "Do it." They moved fast. The gurney was a blur of motion down a silent, gleaming corridor. The acoustic ceiling tiles flowed past like a river of white squares. She was alone, stripped of her husband, her home, and her resources, now being stripped for surgery. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. Richard's voice echoed in the sterile quiet of her mind, a venomous whisper from a lifetime ago during a fight about her career. The memory surfaced. She's just the vessel, not the cargo. The gurney swung around a corner, the rubber wheels silent on the polished floor, heading for the imposing double doors of the operating room. A flash of crimson blocked the path. "Brittany Sterling!" She stood there, a scarlet slash against the hospital's white and gray palette, her arms crossed. Her heavy gold jewelry was a gaudy, out-of-place declaration in the hushed hallway. She must have come straight from the penthouse, expecting to find an empty waiting room, to call Lena's bluff and gloat. The shock on her face was plain, a brief, satisfying crack in her perfect facade. She saw the gurney, the intravenous drip snaking into Lena's arm, the grim-faced nurses. She saw this was real! "Well," Brittany sneered, her voice brittle as glass, a desperate, pathetic attempt to regain control. "Always so dramatic." The words barely registered, like flies buzzing at a distance. Lena's gaze drifted past her to the cold, brushed steel of the operating room doors. They were her only focus, her salvation. The gurney didn't even slow down. It pushed past Brittany as if she were a ghost, a silent, powerful rebuke. The doors swung open, and Lena was swallowed by the blinding white light. The room was colder than the hallway, the air humming with the sound of machinery and smelling of ozone and iodine. A blue curtain went up, a final wall separating her from the work of the surgeons. From her own body, she felt a pulling, a strange, insistent pressure, no pain. The disembodied voices of the medical team were a calm, professional murmur above her. She stared at the reflection of the controlled chaos in the curved metal of a large light fixture. And then, a new sound. A sound that tore through the clinical hum and the quiet voices. It was not a cry so much as a raw, indignant squall, a wet, primal wail that was all fury and life, slicing the sterile air into a before and an after. It was the most beautiful, most triumphant sound she had ever heard. "No!" Hours later, the world came back into focus. She was in a private suite. The morning sun streamed through a large window, painting the pale cream-colored walls in shades of liquid gold. She was aching, a deep, profound soreness in her core. She was empty. The familiar, welcome weight in her belly was gone, leaving a hollowed-out feeling. A nurse entered, her rubber-soled shoes whispering on the floor. She carried a small bundle wrapped in a simple white hospital blanket. "Someone is very eager to meet her mother." A moment passed. The nurse gently, expertly placed the bundle in Lena's arms. She was so small, impossibly, miraculously small. A perfect miniature face, a delicate dusting of black hair, and tiny curled fingers that grasped instinctively at the soft blanket. This was Amara. The lawsuits, the betrayal, the house, the money, it all turned to dust and blew away. The vast, agonizing universe of her pain collapsed into this single, miraculous, warm point. She smelled of milk and something else, something sweet and new and uniquely her own. She was finally home. The private suite was bathed in a soft, ambient glow from recessed lighting. Outside, the city pulsed with quiet energy, a distant hum against the hospital's hushed tranquility. Amara, swaddled in a soft, organic cotton blanket, lay nestled in a clear bassinet beside Lena's bed. Her tiny chest rose and fell in a rhythm as delicate as a butterfly's wings. The air in the room was a blend of hospital sterility and the sweet, milky scent of a newborn. It was cool, pristine. Lena watched her. Her hand, a pale contrast against the cream sheet, reached out, her index finger tracing the curve of Amara's cheek. So perfect, so utterly dependent. A fierce, protective warmth spread through Lena, pushing back the lingering chill of betrayal and loss. She was still sore, a deep, persistent ache beneath the heavy surgical dressing. The C-section scar was a raw reminder of how close she had come to losing everything, to losing her. Amara stirred, a tiny whimper escaping her lips. Lena lifted her carefully, the movement sending a jolt through her core. Her chin lifted. Amara rooted, instinctively finding Lena's breast. The sensation was tender, primal. Lena closed her eyes, savoring the quiet connection. This was real. This tiny, breathing, hungry being was her anchor, her future. She stroked Amara's impossibly soft, dark curls. Her baby's skin, a warm, rich cocoa against Lena's own, felt like velvet. She breathed in the scent of newness, a sweet, yeasty fragrance that clung to Amara's delicate skin. The world outside the hospital room felt distant, unreal. The headlines, the lawsuits, Richard's venom, they were background noise to this profound, quiet symphony. But the symphony couldn't last. Reality, a cold, persistent current, seeped back in. Richard had taken everything. Her home, her car, her accounts, even her professional reputation was under attack. She was adrift, battered, except for this small, warm weight in her arms. She looked at the polished mahogany nightstand where her phone lay, dark and silent. There was only one call left to make, the one she had avoided, the one that meant admitting defeat. Her pride, a stubborn companion, fought against it. But Amara's soft suckling at her breast reminded her. This wasn't about pride anymore. This was about survival. A brief silence. She shifted Amara to a burping position, gently patting her back. A tiny, surprisingly robust burp echoed in the quiet room. Lena laid her back in the bassinet, adjusting the blanket. Amara's eyes fluttered open, dark pools reflecting the muted light. A soft sigh escaped her. Lena leaned over, kissing the crown of her head. "I've got you, my love." Her hand trembled as she reached for the phone. It felt heavy, a gateway to a world she wasn't ready to face, but had to. She scrolled through her contacts, pausing at the name of the one person who, despite everything, she knew would always answer. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, a deep, bone-weary fatigue that settled in her shoulders. She rubbed her temples. Her eyes were gritty. The fluorescent glow of the hallway outside, visible under the door, was a harsh reminder of the institutional world she was in. She took a deep breath, the sterile scent of the hospital mingling with Amara's sweetness. She pressed the call button. The phone rang once, twice, a third time, and then a gruff, familiar voice. "Lena?" The voice was deep, resonant, laced with an immediate, unmistakable concern. No preamble, no hesitation, just her name. A moment passed. "Dad!" Her voice was barely a whisper. The single word felt raw, torn from a place she had kept locked away. A pause, a held breath on the other end of the line. The sound of distant traffic, even through the speaker, was faint. "Are you all right?" His tone was even, betraying nothing of the tumult she knew he must be feeling. I had her." A tear, hot and swift, escaped and traced a path down her cheek. "It was early." Another pause, longer this time. A deep sigh, almost inaudible. "I know." Her breath hitched. She hadn't called him until now. No one else knew. How could he know? How do you know? "That doesn't matter right now, daughter." His voice was firm, a general giving an order. "What matters is you and Amara." A brief silence. Lena wiped the tear away with the back of her hand. Her chin lifted, a familiar, instinctive response to adversity. "He took everything, Dad." The words came out in a rush, a dam breaking. my home, my money, my career." "Did he?" The voice on the other end was steel. Quiet, dangerous steel. "He served me papers, custody motion. He called me an unfit mother." Her voice broke. "He will regret that, no question." A simple, declarative sentence. "I'm in the hospital. She's tiny." Lena couldn't stop the flow. The vulnerability was terrifying yet liberating. "She's beautiful, Dad." "I'll be there tomorrow." "No." Lena looked at Amara, sleeping soundly. "Don't. Not yet." She couldn't explain, couldn't articulate the shame, the fierce desire to handle this herself, even when she was utterly broken. "Lena," his voice softened, "just a fraction. You don't have to do this alone. You never have." "I have nothing left. He stripped me bare." A small sob escaped. She pressed her hand to her chest, over the fresh incision, as if to hold herself together. "You have everything that matters." His voice was a calm, steady hand on her shoulder. "You have your daughter, and you have me." A moment passed. She couldn't respond. The sheer relief, the knowledge that she wasn't truly alone, was overwhelming. She just held the phone, listening to the quiet assurance on the other end. "Get some rest. I'll make some calls." The line clicked. Lena lowered the phone slowly, staring at the darkened screen. She was drained, emptied, yet a tiny spark flickered within her. He knew. He was coming. She wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. She looked at Amara, a fragile, exquisite new beginning. Hope. A fragile seedling, pushed through the hardened soil of her despair. A faint sound. Footsteps. Distinct, measured steps in the hushed corridor. Approaching. Slowing. Lena's breath caught. She knew that stride, that cadence. It was the sound of unwavering resolve, of formidable power, of a presence that commanded respect without ever needing to demand it. The door handle turned. The door swung inward without a sound, a testament to the expensive, silent, close hinges of the luxury maternity suite. A man filled the frame. He was tall, with a stillness that seemed to not just absorb the room's quiet hum, but to cancel it entirely. He wore a dark, bespoke suit of charcoal wool, but it sat on his shoulders with the rigid discipline of a military dress uniform. The faint, clean scent of cedar and pressed linen drifted in with him, a stark contrast to the room's blend of antiseptic and baby powder. His hair was cut short, a precise military crop flecked with gray at the temples. His face was a study in hard lines and unforgiving angles, a face that had made decisions affecting thousands and had never once looked back. His eyes, dark and piercing, swept the room in a single, comprehensive glance, the gleaming medical equipment, the clear-sighted bassinet, and finally, Lena. This was General Marcus Dubois, retired. He was her father. He stepped into the room, his polished leather Oxfords making no sound on the high-grade linoleum. The door clicked shut behind him, a sound as soft and final as a vault closing. He moved with an unnerving economy of motion, not a single wasted gesture. His gaze, which had surveyed the room with the cool detachment of a field commander assessing a new position, softened by a fraction as he looked at Lena. It was a barely perceptible shift in the hard set of his jaw, a minute relaxation of the muscles around his eyes. For anyone else, it would have been nothing. For Lena, it was a seismic event. "Dad!" Her voice was a wisp of sound, dry and cracked. "Lena!" He didn't move to her. Not yet. His eyes drifted to the clear bassinet where Amara slept, her tiny chest rising and falling in a gentle, perfect rhythm. For a long moment, he just looked. It was not the look of a doting grandfather, but of a strategist assessing his most valuable, most precious asset. He was cataloging every detail, from the dusting of dark hair on her head to the tiny starfish hands curled by her face. A moment passed. Two figures, a man and a woman in severe dark business attire, slipped in behind him as silent as his shadow. They ignored Lena completely, their presence functional, impersonal. Their focus was absolute. The woman, her hair in a tight chignon, moved to the small guest desk, placing a slim, matte black laptop of unbranded carbon fiber on its polished surface. She opened it and the screen glowed to life with a field of encrypted code, no startup sound, no logo. The man, equally severe, placed a compact satellite phone beside it. A faint scent of ozone, the crisp, dry smell of high-end electronics under load, cut through the room's air. Lena watched them, her hand instinctively going to the thick dressing over her incision. A dull, throbbing ache reminded her of the battle she had just survived. This was her father's way. He was not just here to offer comfort, he was here to wage war. The door flew open again, hitting the stopper with a sharp crack that made Amara stir in her sleep with a tiny, protesting squeak. Captain Richard Miller strode in, his face a mask of triumphant disdain. He carried a leather-bound folio, holding it out before him like a scepter. His suit was aggressively fashionable, a shade of blue too bright for the room. His confidence, a cloying, heavy cologne that suffocated the air. He was here to witness her final surrender. A moment passed. He stopped short. His eyes flickered from Lena's pale face to the general, then to the two silent figures at the desk. A brief flash of confusion crossed his face, a momentary disruption of his perfect swagger, but it was quickly replaced by a sneering amusement. He laughed. It was a loud, grating sound in the tranquil room. "Well, Lena, bringing your father? How predictable." He walked further into the room, his expensive shoes squeaking on the immaculate floor, circling the foot of her bed like a shark. He didn't so much as glance at the bassinet. "Did you think this old soldier could frighten me? What's he gonna do, court-martial me?" He chuckled at his own joke. "I'm afraid you misunderstand the new landscape. This is a boardroom, not a battlefield, and in this room, I am the five-star general." A brief silence. He tossed the folio onto her bed. It landed with a heavy slap on the pristine cream blanket, disturbingly close to her legs. "A generous offer, all things considered." His voice dripped with false magnanimity. "Sign over your parental rights and I'll let you walk away with a pittance. A small trust fund, enough to live on quietly. But if you fight me..." He leaned in, his shadow falling over her, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial, venomous whisper. "I will bury you. I will spend every dollar this company has to paint you as an unstable, unfit, failed woman who endangered her own child. I will leak doctored medical records. I will have friends testify about your erratic behavior. I will own the narrative. I will own you, and I will own your daughter." There was a moment of reflection. The general did not even look at him. His attention was on the woman at the laptop. "Status." His voice was low, calm, but it cut through Miller's poisonous whisper like a razor. It was a command. "Credit facilities suspended, sir," the woman replied, her fingers flying across the keyboard in a silent, furious blur. Lines of red text cascaded down her screen. "All corporate accounts linked to Miller's personal authorization codes are frozen." A brief silence. Richard scoffed, straightening up and turning to the general as if addressing a particularly slow servant. "What is this pathetic little show? Do you have any idea who I am? I have the full backing of the Northwind Board. My financials are ironclad." The man with the satellite phone looked up from a secondary screen he produced from his jacket. "The board has been served via secure digital courier. Emergency session invoked per the primary stakeholders directive. They are convening now." A moment passed. Primary stakeholder? Richard's laugh was strained now, a brittle thing. "That's me. I orchestrated the takeover myself." For the first time, General Dubois turned his full, undivided attention to Richard Miller. It was like being pinned by the beam of a searchlight. There was no anger in his eyes, no heat, only a cold, profound disappointment, as if observing a specimen that had failed a simple, crucial test. "You are under a significant misapprehension, Mr. Miller," the general said, his voice flat, every word precisely weighted. "You believe you have executed a corporate coup. You believe you control Northwind Airlines." A brief silence. "I don't believe it. I did it." Richard's voice was losing its baritone confidence, rising in pitch. He gestured expansively, a desperate pantomime of power. "It's my company, my planes, my victory." "You run the routes," the general stated, taking a single, deliberate step toward him. "You manage the payroll. You've been given operational command." He paused, letting the silence stretch, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the soft beep of a heart monitor. Then he delivered the blow. "You don't own the metal." The words hung in the air, 5 words that rearranged the world. Richard stared, his mouth slightly agape. The swagger evaporated, flaking away to reveal a brittle, confused shell. "What? What are you talking about?" A moment passed. Lena pushed herself up on her elbows, the ache in her abdomen, a searing fire, but she welcomed it. It was the fire of battle, and she was no longer on the defensive. Her chin was high, her voice, when it came, was not loud, but it cut through Richard's confusion like a diamond blade. "The fleet, Richard, all 322 aircraft. Northwind doesn't own them. It never has. They're leased." Richard's eyes darted from Lena to her father, a wild, cornered look on his face. "Leased? From who? It's a subsidiary. I checked. It's all internal, a shell corporation for tax purposes." There was a brief silence. "It is a private family trust," the general continued, his voice devoid of any emotion, as if he were reading a weather report. He gestured with his chin toward the sleeping child in the bassinet, a life-altering motion of infinitesimal subtlety. "A trust established for my granddaughter on the day she was born. Its name is Amara." Richard's face went white. The blood drained from it so completely it left a sickly, waxy pallor. He stumbled back a half step, his foot catching briefly on the plush rug. He finally understood. He had not been seizing an empire, he had been a guest, and he had just tried to burn down the landlord's house. He looked at the baby, this tiny, sleeping infant, and saw not a child, but the face of his ruin, the source of a power he had never known existed. The woman at the desk spoke again, her voice crisp. "The call is coming through, General." She held the satellite phone out. General Dubois took it. "Dubois," he answered. He listened for a moment, his gaze fixed on the middle distance, on a point beyond the walls of the room, beyond the city itself. "Correct. The breach of contract is non-negotiable. The moral turpitude clause is now in effect. Execute Article 7. Ground the entire fleet." "Effective immediately." A moment passed. He ended the call with a definitive click that echoed in the sudden, profound silence like a gavel. He looked at the man who stood, broken, in the middle of the luxury hospital suite. The legal folio lay forgotten on the bed, a useless relic of a dead strategy. Richard's hands were empty. His expression was blank. The sheer, beautiful, elegant simplicity of his destruction was too vast to comprehend. "You are a chief executive officer without a company," the general stated, his voice as cold and clear as the air outside. "You are a captain with no planes." Richard stood there silent. The whir of the air conditioning, the soft breathing of the baby, the distant pulse of the city, it all rushed in to fill the vacuum where his power had been. His mouth opened, then closed, a fish gasping for air in an empty tank. No sound emerged. His expensive, fashionable suit suddenly looked too big for him, a costume for a part he could no longer play. He was a statue of a man who had just been erased. His entire world was gone. The air in the Sky Lounge was different. The same chill clung to the brushed steel and black leather. The same panoramic view of the sun-bleached tarmac stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling glass, making long, geometric shadows on the plush carpet. But the silence was new. It was not the quiet of elite privacy. It was a funereal silence, thick, heavy, and broken only by the whisper of the industrial climate control. The air smelled of ozone from the half-dozen large, currently dark display screens, a sharp, sterile scent like the air after a lightning strike. It mingled with the faint, expensive smell of leather conditioner and the ghost of industrial glass cleaner, creating a cold, sterile stage for a corporate execution. Lena sat in a cream-colored cashmere wrap, less a piece of clothing than a suit of armor. It was a stark island of calm in the coiled tension of the room. Her posture was erect, her chin high. Her hand rested on her flat abdomen, not on the memory of a swell, but on the tender, precise ridge of her scar beneath the soft fabric. It was an anchor, a source of strength, a reminder of what she had fought for. Across from her, General Dubois was a statue in charcoal wool, the polished service medals on his lapel catching the light with a dull gleam, a silent testament to his own unassailable authority. His presence was a gravitational force that bent the room's energy around him. Beside them sat a man Lena had met only hours ago, Elias Vance, her lead counsel. He held a tablet with an economy of motion that suggested immense, controlled power, his face as sharp and unreadable as the polished black screen in his hands. On the other side of the vast, low-slung table sat Captain Richard Miller. His dark suit seemed to be straining at the shoulders, a cage for his manic energy. He was a predator pacing even while seated. Beside him, Brittany Sterling was a slash of crimson silk, a dress the color of fresh blood. A cascade of gold chains around her neck whispered and shivered with every nervous movement she made, like a pocketful of anxious coins. They were flanked by two lawyers who looked pale and out of their depth, their gazes darting between their clients and the unyielding face of Elias Vance. Arrayed behind them in curving rows of expensive seating were the board of Northwind Airlines, a silent jury of the powerful and the privileged. Among them, almost invisible in his crisp service uniform, was Officer David Kim. His expression was unchanged from the day he witnessed the first act of this drama. Elias Vance stood. The faint rustle of his tailored suit was the only sound. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "Let the record show," he began, his voice a blade carving the silence. We are convened to address the hostile termination of Dr. Lena Dubois and the subsequent illegal seizure of corporate control by Captain Richard Miller." He paused, letting the accusation settle. "This will not be a protracted affair." Richard laughed, a harsh, dry bark that echoed unnaturally in the quiet. He shot to his feet, trying to command the room. "Illegal? I had the board's proxy. I had the votes. This is a pathetic last-ditch effort from a woman who couldn't handle the pressure. She abandoned her post. She is a liability." He spoke to the board, a performer playing to his audience, his voice booming with practiced confidence. "This airline is a finely tuned machine, not a therapy session. She grounded an entire fleet because of a personal failing. She wants to cry foul after the fact? After her own incompetence grounded her? We are an airline, not a daycare. We cannot be held hostage by one pilot's personal problems." A moment passed. Elias ignored him, his gaze fixed on a screen on the wall. It flickered to life. A series of bank statements, routing numbers, and digital transaction logs appeared, highlighted in stark red. At 9:17 Pacific Standard Time, following the illegal grounding of Dr. Dubois, Captain Miller initiated a series of transfers, consolidating operational funds into accounts under his sole authority. Accounts which were then used as leverage to secure his new leadership position. "Standard procedure for a change in leadership," Richard snapped, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. "Is it?" Elias agreed smoothly, "when the leadership change is legitimate." Another tap on his tablet. The screen refreshed, a single, brutal sentence displayed in large, black font. However, as of 10 p.m. last night, all credit facilities for Northwind Airlines were suspended. All operational accounts frozen. There was a brief silence. The board members stirred. A low murmur rippled through the room, a wave of alarm. Richard's face tightened, the blood draining from it, leaving his tan looking sallow. On whose authority? "On the authority of the owner," Elias said simply. The door to the lounge opened. An airport official escorted Officer David Kim to a small, isolated chair facing the board. He looked at no one, his back straight, his hands on his knees. He simply sat, a factual anchor in a room of liars and performers. Elias gestured toward him. Officer Kim was present during Captain Miller's initial discussion with Dr. Dubois. He was a passive observer, but his body camera was not. The main screen changed. It was footage from Scene 1, raw and visceral. The high-fidelity speakers, usually reserved for shareholder presentations, now broadcasted raw fury. Richard's face, contorted in rage, filled the screen. His voice, digitally clarified, boomed through the silent lounge. The tirade, the venom, the public stripping of Lena's dignity. The board watched, rapt. One woman, a titan of industry, put a hand to her mouth. Another scribbled furiously in a notebook. Lena did not watch. She had lived it. She closed her eyes, feeling the phantom vibrations of his rage against her skin. Instead, she watched Richard. He was transfixed, a narcissist, mesmerized by his own monstrous reflection. The video showed Lena, her hand on her belly, her face pale but resolute. Then her voice, quiet but unwavering, filled the room. The audio was crystal clear, a sliver of steel beneath the roaring storm of his voice. Elias paused the video on Lena's determined face. He picked up a single sheet of paper from the table, a certified transcript. He read from it, his voice lending the words a cold, legal weight. "This isn't just a plane, Captain. It's my legacy." Silence. The two lawyers beside Richard exchanged a panicked glance. The air crackled. This was the moment the ground shifted, the moment a private humiliation became a public indictment. The echo of those words, spoken now in this cold, formal setting, sealed his fate. He wasn't a leader asserting authority. He was a bully caught on tape. Richard slammed his hand on the table, the sharp crack making several board members jump. This is a farce, a character assassination. I was protecting the integrity of this airline, and I was protecting my family. He gestured wildly toward Brittany, a desperate theatrical play for sympathy. My unborn child! Brittany's head snapped up. It was a gamble. She stood, her crimson dress a sudden, violent bloom in the sterile room. Her own hand went to her stomach, a mirror of Lena's earlier, genuine gesture. He's right. Her voice was shrill, catching on a pre-planned sob. Everything Richard did, he did for us, for our baby. Lena's instability, her condition, she was a danger to herself and to all of us. He's a good man, a protector. A woman in the back row stood. She was young, dressed in a simple, inexpensive black dress that looked out of place amongst the designer labels. It was Chloe, Brittany's personal assistant. She clutched a thin manila folder to her chest as if it were a life raft. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I cannot be quiet about this. What? Brittany's eyes widened in a storm of disbelief and fury. Chloe, sit down. You're fired. Chloe flinched but held her ground, her voice small but clear. You fired me this morning by text. She walked forward, the softest footsteps on the plush carpet sounding like drum beats in the silence. She placed the folder on the table in front of Elias. Mr. Sterling is not pregnant. Elective gasp, a rustle of expensive fabric as bodies shifted in their seats. Brittany shrieked, the sound thin and ragged. She's lying, a disgruntled employee. Pay her no mind. Elias opened the folder. He held up a single printed receipt, his fingers framing it like a piece of evidence in a capital case. The company logo, Belly Up Illusions, was almost comical in its stark, black and white finality. From Belly Up Illusions, a theatrical supply company. One 6-month prosthetic pregnancy belly, purchased 2 months ago, billed to Mr. Sterling's corporate expense account. He then held up a printed email. An email from Mr. Sterling to a friend, dated last week. It reads, "The idiot actually bought it." If this doesn't seal the deal and get the old cow out of the picture, nothing will. This was Brittany's downfall. Her own words, her own arrogance. She crumpled. The sound that escaped her was not a sob, but a dry, horrifying gasp, the sound of a balloon popping. She looked at Richard, her eyes pleading for him to fix it, to roar and intimidate and make it all go away. He stared past her, his face a blank mask of horror. He saw not a partner, but an accomplice who had just confessed to a crime he hadn't known she was committing. A portly, dignified man in the front row of the board rose slowly. His face was ashen. His suit was worth more than a car. The gold chains around Brittany's neck had been a gift from him. Brittany, he said, his voice shaking with a quiet, terrible rage. As your uncle and as a member of this board, I have indulged your ambitions. I told them you were headstrong, not a common grifter. I have funded your life. I have defended your character. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the prosthetic belly receipt, the damning email. That indulgence ends today. You are no longer a Sterling. You are on your own. He turned his back on her, the soft thud of his Italian loafers on the plush carpet, a gavel strike of disavowal. He did not sit, he simply stood there, a public monument to her disgrace. Brittany Sterling looked at the faces staring at her, no sympathy, only cold, clinical disgust. She had miscalculated. She thought this was a drama, and she was the star. She had not realized it was a court-martial, and she had just incriminated herself. All eyes turned to Richard. The swagger was gone. The bombast evaporated. The energy went out of him all at once, as if a plug had been pulled. He sank into his chair, his expensive suit suddenly a costume for a part he could no longer play. For a brief, flickering moment, the mask fell away. There was no villain, just a broken man. "My father was a baggage handler," he whispered, his voice cracked and thin, a ghost of its former boom. He spoke to no one, his gaze lost in the polished surface of the table. "He worked 30 years for this airline. He told me to own the sky, not just fly in it." He looked at his hands, empty on the table. "I just wanted him to be proud." The 4 sentences hung in the air, a fleeting human ghost in a room of corporate execution. It changed nothing, but it explained everything. Lena's hand rested on her abdomen, her fingers tracing the scar that was the deed to her victory. It was a silent promise to the daughter who would never know a world where men like Richard Miller held power over her. The battle was over. The cost was etched onto her body, a permanent reminder. But the war was won. The room was still. The board members exchanged glances, the silent consensus passing between them like a current. The uncle remained standing, a pillar of judgment. The lawyers for Richard Miller began packing their briefcases with the quiet finality of undertakers, the snap of a latch echoing like a gunshot in the tomb-like quiet. Nia, the board's formidable chairwoman, rose to her feet. She did not speak. Nia stood. Silence in the Sky Lounge was no longer merely funereal. It was absolute. A vacuum so profound it seemed to press in on the eardrums, a palpable weight in the opulent space. The polished surfaces of the dark wood and chrome reflected the cool, clinical glow of the overhead lights, making the air feel thinner, colder, as if all warmth had been systematically extracted. Elias Vance's voice, when it finally broke the suffocating stillness, was precise and surgical, cutting through the void like a laser beam. "Captain Miller, the board has rendered its verdict." Richard flinched, a subtle tremor that ran through his shoulders and down his spine, a jolt of ice in his veins. He remained seated, hunched, a marionette with its strings cut, his limbs heavy and unresponsive, imbued with an oppressive inertia. His custom-tailored dark suit, a charcoal gray that had once been a symbol of his formidable authority and impeccable taste, now hung on him like a shroud, its fine wool feeling rough and alien against his skin. Across the gleaming, unmarred surface of the conference table, Brittany Sterling was a collapsed heap of crimson silk, her soft, muffled sobs barely disturbing the air, more like the faint whimpers of a trapped animal. The delicate gold chains adorning her neck and wrist caught the cold, hard light, glinting like frozen tears, mocking her distress. Her uncle, still standing rigidly by her side, was a monument to their shared shame, his face a mask of pinched disgust, his gaze fixed on some distant, unseen point beyond the panoramic windows. The air, already sterile from the advanced climate control system, seemed to thin further, making each breath a conscious, struggling effort, a desperate gasp for sustenance. The faint, almost imperceptible smell of ozone, a byproduct of the massive display screens that lined one wall, mingled with the fading scent of expensive leather from the chairs. Now, however, there was an added metallic tang, acrid and sharp, like the coppery taste of blood in a parched mouth, or the pervasive, sickening odor of fear. Nia, the chairwoman, stepped forward, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Her heels made no sound on the deep pile carpet. Her presence commanded the space, not through volume or grand gestures, but with a quiet, irresistible force, an unyielding gravity that drew all attention. The crisp fabric of her business suit whispered softly as she moved, a sound barely audible above the faint hum of the building itself. In her hands, she held a single, slim file, its edges unnaturally sharp and precise in the unforgiving light. It felt impossibly heavy in the silence, a physical manifestation of Richard's complete and utter undoing. "Captain Miller," Nia began, her voice a calm, even alto, devoid of any discernible emotion, each syllable perfectly articulated, a study in controlled composure. "Your actions constitute gross professional misconduct." Each word was measured, distinct, landing with the chilling finality of a stone being placed carefully on a freshly dug grave, sealing a fate. Fraudulent misrepresentation of corporate assets, embezzlement of operational funds, and the illegal detention and public humiliation of Dr. Lena Dubois. She paused, allowing each charge to resonate in the heavy air, a slow, methodical hammering of nails into a coffin. Richard finally looked up, his eyes unfocused, raw with a pain that felt too deep for tears, too numb for expression, like open wounds that refused to bleed. His gaze drifted across Nia's impassive face, the blurred faces of the silent board members, before finally settling on his own hands, resting heavily on the table, their strength suddenly foreign to him. "It wasn't like that," he rasped, his voice a dry, grating sound barely audible above the hum of the ventilation, like sand scraping against stone. A flicker of desperation, a last futile attempt at justification, crossed his features, quickly extinguished as his shoulders slumped further. I can explain." Nia did not acknowledge him. Her gaze remained steady, fixed just above his head, as if he were a specimen under a microscope, or perhaps not even there at all. Her composure was absolute, effective immediately. She continued, the words echoing with chilling authority, each one a hammer blow. "Your employment with Northwind Airlines is terminated." A collective gasp, thin and sharp, rippled through the few remaining board members, a sound like dry leaves skittering across a vast, empty space. Termination was expected, a foregone conclusion whispered in the industry for weeks. But the sheer speed, the absolute clinical precision of the pronouncement, the utter lack of protracted negotiation sent a cold shiver down their spines. It set a precedent. All stock options, pensions, and accrued benefits are forfeited. Nia's voice remained perfectly level, unwavering, delivering the ultimate financial castration. Furthermore, your personal assets, those acquired through the fraudulent activities documented in this file. She paused, tapping the slim file with a manicured finger. The small, sharp sound amplified in the hushed room, are subject to immediate seizure. The full implications of her words crashed down on Richard, not just his career, his reputation, but everything he had built, everything he had stolen, everything he was. He tried to stand, a desperate, instinctive movement to escape the crushing weight of her pronouncements, to physically remove himself from the scene of his public execution. But his legs, suddenly devoid of strength, buckled beneath him, rubbery and unresponsive. He lurched forward, clutching the cool, smooth edge of the conference table, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the polished wood, fighting to stay upright, to retain some fleeting semblance of dignity. A low groan escaped him, swallowed by the cavernous room. Furthermore, Nia pressed on, unrelenting, her gaze boring into him, as if to strip him bare. Given the egregious nature of your crimes, the board has unanimously voted to pursue criminal charges. The finality of the statement hung heavy, an inescapable guillotine. Freedom! The word echoed hollowly in his mind, thin and brittle. Gone! The cold, stark truth settled over him, heavier than any physical burden he had ever known. The world outside, the blue sky, the open air, the vastness of the future he had so carelessly squandered, it all vanished behind the impenetrable walls of impending imprisonment, a suffocating darkness. Officer David Kim, who had remained a silent, unmoving sentinel by the lounge doors throughout the entire grim proceeding, finally moved. His soft-soled shoes made no sound on the plush carpet as he approached Richard, his face an impassive, professional mask, betraying no judgment, no emotion. With a fluid, practiced motion, a set of gleaming silver handcuffs appeared in his hand, a stark, almost blinding contrast to the dark, somber uniform he wore. The soft, metallic click of the cuffs, precise and inevitable, echoed in the vast room, a sound that seemed to reverberate in Richard's very bones, sealing his fate with an unnerving finality. The chill of the metal clamped around his wrists was absolute, a tangible end. Richard's head slumped forward, his chin almost touching his chest, his gaze vacant. The fight, the desperate, clawing struggle to maintain his empire, his facade, his very identity, was over. He was a prisoner, not just of the law, but of his own ruin, his own catastrophic choices. A deep, shuddering sigh escaped his lips, a sound of utter defeat, of a spirit utterly broken. The subtle scents of the room, ozone and leather, now seemed tainted, sickly sweet with the stench of his failure, the acrid tang of despair. Brittany Sterling let out a strangled cry, a high, thin sound of pure anguish that cut through the silence like a knife. She scrambled to her feet, her crimson silk dress rustling loudly, the fabric a vivid splash of color against the subdued tones of the lounge, a jarring note of hysteria. She stumbled towards Richard, her hand outstretched, as if to pull him back from the precipice, from the cold grasp of the law. Her perfectly coiffed hair was beginning to come undone, straggling around her tear-streaked face. "Richard, tell them you didn't mean to. It was a mistake. You can fix it." Her voice was shrill, desperate, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face, leaving dark, smudged trails on her cheeks. She sounded like a frightened child, pleading with an unyielding authority, clutching at straws. "Please, Richard, say something." Richard did not look at her. His gaze remained fixed, unfocused, on his cuffed wrists, on the polished silver glinting under the lounge lights reflecting the emptiness of his future, a bleak, distorted panorama. The cold metal against his skin felt like a brand, a permanent mark of his disgrace. Brittany turned her wild, tear-filled eyes to Nia, her chest heaving with desperate hope and burgeoning anger. "You can't do this. He's a good man. He just made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes." Her voice cracked, bordering on full hysteria, betraying the fragile veneer of her composure. The desperation was raw, ugly, laid bare for everyone in the room to witness, stripping away her cultivated elegance. Nia simply looked at her, her expression unchanged, her eyes cool and distant, a silent, damning judgment that needed no words. Her gaze was steady, unwavering, and utterly devoid of pity, a stone wall against Brittany's frantic pleas. Brittany's gaze faltered, then fell to the man who had been her protector, her ticket to a lavish, glittering life of endless luxury. The weight of the gold chains on her neck, once symbols of her status and endless indulgence, now seemed to choke her, suddenly heavy and constricting, pulling her down. She saw his blank, defeated face, the light gone from his eyes, the life drained from his posture. The man who was supposed to be a titan, an unshakable force, impervious to the petty concerns of the world. The man who had promised her everything, the world at her feet, glittering like champagne bubbles. She had staked her entire future, her very identity, on his perceived power, on his boundless ambition, on his carefully constructed myth. Now he was nothing. He had nothing. Her voice dropped, the desperation replaced by a chilling, venomous coldness that bit like frost, sharp and sudden. "You promised me a world, Richard. You gave me nothing but lies." The words hung in the air, sharp and bitter, a final, poisoned arrow aimed squarely at his shattered pride. She spun away from him, her red dress a whirlwind of fury and despair, the silk hissing against itself with the abrupt motion. She pushed past her uncle, who still stood, frozen in disgust, his own sense of shame too profound for movement, too paralyzed to offer comfort or reproach. Brittany fled the lounge, her hurried, erratic footsteps, a fading tattoo on the plush, sound-absorbing carpet, growing fainter with each frantic stride. The cloying, overly sweet scent of her expensive perfume, a scent that had once symbolized her allure and luxurious existence, lingered for a moment, then was gone, dissipated into the sterile air, leaving behind only the metallic tang of regret and the faint, bitter smell of spent hope. Richard did not react. He was already elsewhere, lost in the labyrinth of his own ruin, his mind a fractured landscape of broken promises and shattered dreams. The weight of the cuffs, the cold press of the metal was merely an external manifestation of the chains already forged around his soul, binding him to his fate. Elias Vance approached Lena, his footsteps soft and deliberate on the carpet. A faint smile, rare and almost invisible, touched his lips, a fleeting shadow of satisfaction that softened the stern lines of his face. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, held a flicker of something akin to peace, a quiet vindication. "It's done, Dr. Dubois." His voice was quiet, respectful, a stark contrast to the cold precision he had used with Richard. The tone was one of professional accomplishment, subtly tinged with personal satisfaction. Lena nodded, a slow, deliberate movement that conveyed both weariness and profound relief. Her chin remained high, her posture erect. A woman who had weathered the storm and emerged unbroken, her spirit refined in the crucible of adversity. She looked at Richard, slumped in his seat, flanked by Officer Kim, his once imposing figure now utterly diminished, reduced to a pathetic shell. The arrogance that had fueled his every action, the venom that had tainted his words and choices, was gone, evaporated. He was just a man, a defeated, pathetic man, a hollow shell, exposed and empty, stripped of all pretense. The soft, indifferent hum of the climate control filled the air, a gentle, constant murmur, utterly unaware of the human drama that had just unfolded, a neutral backdrop to the shifting tides of power and consequence. General Dubois, a pillar of quiet strength, moved to Lena's side. He placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring, a silent anchor in the turbulent aftermath. The familiar weight of his presence was a deep, unspoken comfort, grounding her. "Justice served," he said, his voice low, a deep rumble of quiet satisfaction, echoing the sentiment but with a father's protective warmth. Lena looked at her father. The hard lines of his face, usually set in a disciplined mask of military stoicism, had softened imperceptibly. A hint of profound relief, a shadow of deep pride, flickered in his eyes, reflecting the depth of his concern for her. Their shared ordeal had forged a new, deeper bond between them, strengthened by adversity. She turned her gaze back to Richard, her hand instinctively going to her flat abdomen, her fingers tracing the tender, precise ridge of the scar left by her surgery, a phantom memory of pain now transforming into a symbol of life. Amara, her daughter, her legacy. The scar was no longer a wound, but a badge of survival. A silent promise of a future she had fought so fiercely to reclaim, a constant reminder of what she had endured and overcome. Officer Kim began to lead Richard away. Richard stumbled, his head still bowed, his gaze fixed on the polished floor tiles as if seeking an answer there, or perhaps just trying to avoid any contact with the reality around him. He walked slowly, a shuffling, defeated gait, each step heavy with the weight of his disgrace, his shoulders hunched in submission. The persistent metallic clinking of the handcuffs was the only sound now, a rhythmic, inescapable reminder of his capture, his fall from grace. He was escorted out, through the double doors, out of her life forever. He would never fly again. He would never command again. The lounge emptied quickly, the air still thick with the lingering tension, slowly dissipating like smoke. The board members, chastened and visibly relieved that the painful ordeal was over, filed out in a quiet, almost reverent procession, avoiding eye contact. The lawyers, their work concluded, gathered their briefcases, their faces devoid of expression, already mentally moving on to the next case, the next strategy. The profound silence returned, clean and vast, swallowing the last echoes of the dramatic confrontation, a pristine canvas once more. The sun, now low in the sky, a vast, molten orb sinking towards the horizon, cast long golden streaks across the highly polished floor, illuminating countless dust motes dancing like tiny, indifferent stars in the sterile air. The panoramic windows, once a frame for soaring ambition and endless possibilities, now reflected only the vast, empty expanse of the tarmac, waiting patiently under the fading light, a silent testament to cycles of departure and arrival. Lena stood for a long moment, breathing deeply, letting the silence wash over her, a cleansing wave. She walked to the window, the soft cashmere wrap, a cream cloud around her shoulders, a comforting, familiar weight. The world outside stretched, limitless, under the vast, deepening canvas of the sky. The planes sat on the tarmac, gleaming white in the late afternoon sun, their engines silent, their wings spread wide like sleeping giants, majestic and powerful even in repose. Her planes, Amara's planes. The future. She felt a deep, abiding sense of peace settle over her, a calm that permeated her very bones, easing the tension that had held her captive for so long. The long, arduous fight was truly over. The pain, sharp and visceral just moments ago, was fading, receding into a distant memory, becoming a lesson rather than a wound. The scar was not a mark of suffering, but a vibrant testament to victory, to resilience, to the fierce strength she possessed. She looked at her reflection in the glass, a woman stronger than she had ever been, eyes clear and resolute, carrying the weight of her past with grace. A mother, an owner. The doors of the Sky Lounge opened again, the soft hiss of the pneumatic seals barely disturbing the quiet, yet Lena's head snapped up, anticipating. Nia stood there, her quiet power still emanating from her like a gentle hum, a force of nature in miniature. But she was not alone. In her arms, wrapped snugly in a soft, pristine white blanket, was Amara. The baby was awake, her tiny dark eyes wide and curious, taking in the shimmering, unfamiliar world around her with an innocent wonder that seemed to cleanse the room. She was perfect, a small, innocent promise, a beacon of pure, unadulterated hope, illuminating the lingering shadows. Lena walked forward, a faint, tender smile gracing her lips, stretching slowly and genuinely across her face, dissolving the last traces of strain. The fading light caught the tiny gold stud in Amara's ear, a precious gift from Lena, sparkling like a distant star, a tiny point of light in a boundless universe, guiding her forward. Amara, with the unerring instinct of a child reaching for comfort, for connection, reached a tiny, perfectly formed hand toward her mother, her fingers grasping at the air, already seeking. Lena reached out, ready to embrace her future, the warmth of her daughter's skin, a promise of all that was yet to come, a new chapter bathed in light.